So the title of my talk is, What is the Purpose of School? Some of you will say that we need schools to educate. Others will say that schools are necessary to prepare children for a world that looks very different than anything we've ever experienced before. But whatever reason you might attribute for the existence of schools, make no mistake about this. School buildings are obstacles, not assets, when it comes to the kind of education our children deserve. And unfortunately, I'd say that that statement would apply to 95% of schools all around the world. Now, how do I know this? To answer that, I have to take you back to my own school days right here in Hyderabad at St. Patrick's High School. Picture this, 60 sweaty boys trapped in a small, stifling classroom for several hours a day. Drinking water was scarce and freedom non-existent. So after 8 years of enduring this torture, my friends and I made a bold decision. We decided to escape. Literally, not just figuratively. So after attendance every morning, we jumped over the school wall and spent the day exploring the world outside. Cricket, movies, swimming, climbing trees. And I read everything I could lay my hands on. I read for the love of reading and not to pass an exam, obviously. And those were two of the happiest years of my youth. Ironically, I excelled in my exams because some last-minute tutoring had kept everything, all the material fresh in my mind. So I kind of felt sorry for the good kids who had stuck it out in the hell that was our school building. But it all taught me an important life lesson that not everything in the adult world should be taken at face value. Now let me fast forward 20 years. After some interesting twists and turns in my life and career, I found myself in a position of great influence in New York City, overseeing the world's largest school construction program. In the 10 years I was there, we spent $10 billion to construct 100 new schools and renovate 600 others. Here's one of them in Queens, New York. But as I walked through this and the various other schools that we had built, I had an epiphany. I realized that we were not building happy places for learning. In fact, the sad fact was that we were building the same boxes that I had once myself escaped from. So despite their air conditioning and modern technology, our shiny new schools were fundamentally the same. Prisons that made any real creativity and authentic human connection almost impossible. Now, research confirmed my worst fears. None of the measures of school performance had improved even after a $10 billion investment in the capital plant. And so I decided to escape again, this time from the system itself. In the year 2000, at the start of the new millennium, I started my own consulting company with the idea of rethinking school design from a whole new perspective. And this second escape was even more successful than my first escape from school. Now, you guys must be thinking, wow, this guy lived a charmed life. And I have to agree with that. And let me tell you that not a day goes by that I'm not eternally grateful for all the good fortune that I've had. But coming back to my story, in the 24 years that have elapsed since I made that fateful decision to leave everything I knew behind, our company has consulted with innovative clients, school clients in 59 countries on 6 continents, most of whom, by the way, wanted real innovative change. But change is not easy, and this is particularly true when it comes to education, as we all know. Not easy, but certainly not impossible. So at the risk of oversimplifying the process, let me focus on what I believe are 3 essential keys where architecture can be leveraged to bring about lasting and effective change in education. So I call my first key, ditch the cells, mute the bells. For starters, I needed to convince my school clients that they have to get beyond the cells and bells model of schooling and school design. Cells and bells refers to a model where a student leaves a cell and moves to another identical classroom cell when the bell goes off. This is an example of a cells and bells school. And this is often what happens when the bell goes off. So this model of classrooms arrayed along a single or a double-loaded corridor is actually the global norm, and in that sense, not very different from my own school in Hyderabad. But beyond the inhumanity of trapping children in these small boxes, from a practical standpoint, this 100-year-old model militates against today's educational needs. And so I came up with this idea called the teaching and learning practice spectrum, which includes 4 key domains from the world of education that are teacher collaboration, pedagogy, curriculum, and student learning outcomes. I placed each of these on a sliding scale, with the left extreme representing a teacher-centered model of education and the right extreme representing a more modern, student-centered version of education. Now take a look at this black line. That black line is the Cells and Bells school building. It's at the left corner and thereby physically prevents movement down each of these 4 sliders, thereby trapping schools in the teacher-centered model of education. So I realized that my job is simple. As a school architect, I have to get rid of that black line entirely. So with the black line gone, teachers and students can decide to move at their own pace to the right side towards student-centered learning with no pushback from the buildings where they live and learn. To accomplish this, we came up with this model called the learning community. The learning community has a number of learning studios instead of classrooms, surrounded by a variety of other spaces, including a teacher collaboration suite. There are 2 key advantages to the learning community. One is that we get rid of hallways, and by doing that, we are saving 25 to 30% of the space that we can now give back to education. Secondly, for the first time, we have a physical model of school that is completely in sync with the software of education. So the hardware and software are now completely in sync. So here are a couple of schools that started out as Cells and Bells and became learning communities. That's one school and this is another. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit to share with you these 20 modalities of learning. Here are 10, you don't need to memorize them. Here are 10 and here are 10 more. So the whole purpose of this is to let you know that there are multiple ways in which children learn. And the more of these modes of learning that children are exposed to, the richer the quality of their learning experience. So of course, it's incumbent on schools to ensure that all 20 modalities are accommodated in children's primary learning areas. But here's the catch. The Cells and Bells model is optimized for 2. That's right, 2 modalities of learning. The learning community is optimized for 19. Now you may tell me, surely you can do more than 2 things in a classroom, and my response to you would be, not unless everybody is doing the same thing at the same time, like learning independently or learning in small groups. The minute you try to mix and match modalities in a classroom, chaos ensues and it becomes unmanageable. So take a look at this classroom, which actually is a pretty good classroom if you think about it. And if you try to superimpose those 20 modalities on here, you'll see, as I said, becoming unmanageable. Now I wanted to contrast that with images I've taken of schools that we've converted to learning communities, and I want you to observe the kinds of teaching and learning that are happening there, and you'll immediately see that this would be impossible in a traditional classroom setting. I think the pictures definitely speak for themselves. And remember, these were all schools that started out as Cells and Bells. So I call my second key the 1950s called, and they want their school back. Now, this would be funnier if it weren't so painfully true. Take a look at these 3 statements. They accurately describe what education looked like in the 1950s. Children spend most of their school day in classrooms or labs. Teachers do not routinely collaborate with their peers. Lessons are standardized and not personalized. Unfortunately, these are not some historical curiosities. They're still mostly true for too many schools around the world today. Now, this list of 3 statements is part of a longer list I've created of 12 descriptors, 11 of which describes the school from the 1950s, and the 12th describes the school from the 1990s because it deals with computers. So here's what I do. I hand this list to my school clients and tell them, honestly, how many of these descriptors apply to your school today? And this is what I tend to get. Now, this is an actual result from a school I've been working with. And as you can see, all 12 boxes that are checked are in the mostly true or somewhat true column, which means this is a school the 1950s would definitely want back. Fortunately, this school is run by some very caring educators and school leaders who are working frantically to upgrade their facilities. Unfortunately, I can't say that's true for the vast number of school buildings all around the world, which seem to be trapped in a time capsule. Now, take a moment to let that sink in. Here we are in 2024, and we still have schools practicing a model of education that looks almost identical to the way education looked like in the 1950s. That's not just a problem, guys. That is completely unacceptable. So, of course, this brings us to the question of, so what is a modern school, right? Well, to answer that, I've taken the statements I made about the 1950s, and for each of them, I've created a corresponding statement for a modern school. Children are free to move to spaces that match their learning activity. Teachers work and collaborate in a professional office throughout the school day, I might add, and personalized student work is focused on creativity and complex problem solving. Now, these are the things we've been asking for years, things that parents, teachers, students, school leaders have said we want. Now, this list actually is part of a longer list that I've created that with 12 descriptors that correspond to the 12 from the 1950s. So when schools see this new list, they immediately realize that if they can check all these 12 boxes, by default, they would have created a modern school. But here's the kicker. Not a single one of these 12 modern descriptors can exist in a school that is stuck in the cells and bells model. So when schools cling to that model, they're unable to make their school into a modern school, which is just one more reason to say goodbye to cells and bells. My third key I call Pathfinder. That's a one-word key. Or if you want the slightly more interesting, longer version, one small step for your school, one giant leap for education. Now, that might seem like a stretch, but believe me, changing the trajectory of a school is no less complicated than the moon landing. So what is a Pathfinder? A Pathfinder is a low-cost, high-impact, small pilot project that you can do over a summer break. That's very important to repeat. Low-cost, high-impact. Pathfinders can demonstrate at a manageable scale how teachers and students will absolutely thrive when architectural barriers are removed. There is no need to change the curriculum in a Pathfinder. What changes is student engagement and pedagogy. Now, when schools see the dramatic improvements in learning that happen in Pathfinder spaces compared to the rest of the building, they are far more likely to apply those principles and extend those ideas. The other great advantage of Pathfinders is that the demand for change builds from within the school. And that makes it far more likely to succeed than when change is imposed on the school from the outside. So here are a few before and after pictures of some Pathfinder projects we've done. And I think it should demonstrate clearly that even a small investment in infrastructure can realize substantial improvements in the learning environment. So this is from Barcelona, Spain. This is a before picture, and this is after of the same space. And most of these are done over a summer. So you can see that it's not a significant investment of resources or time. This is the International School of Brussels, a temporary school, which over the summer we converted that space. That's the same space. This is before at the American Embassy School right here in New Delhi. That's a before picture of the early learning area, and that's after a summer renovation. This is a school in Tampa, Florida. This used to be a computer lab that they didn't need anymore, which we converted to an innovation lab, again, over a summer at a very low cost. So how do you measure success? Now, this is something that I'm very interested in. So I talk to my school clients, and this is what they tell me. They say, the children are happier. Then they go on to tell me all the various ways in which the learning spaces are helping them. But as far as I'm concerned, they could have just as easily have stopped at the word happier. Because we know that when children are happy and when they are comfortable, half of the learning battle is won. In fact, there's a lot of research from education, from environmental psychology, from architecture, and neuroscience that shows that happy, well-engaged and motivated children are also the best learners. So that brings me back to my original question, what is the purpose of school? Now, I don't expect that you would have changed your answer to that question based on the few minutes I've been speaking, but I do hope you'll ask yourself which physical model of school is most likely to help you realize your vision for education. Is it this one that looks back at the last century? Take a look at that. or this one that's more concerned about our children's future? And I think the answer to that should be self-evident. So in conclusion, I'd like to say that I don't think children should have to escape from school like I had to in order to thrive. My story is a cautionary tale. It's not intended to be a solution for education's problems. For that, we as adults still have some work to do. We are often trapped in a prison of our own making, represented by our firmly held beliefs about the world and particularly about education. And we do need to escape from that prison. And to do that, we may have to remind ourselves that sometimes, just sometimes, the path to success in any endeavor lies outside the walls that others build for us. Thank you.